There's been some fear-mongering online about the Yellowstone supervolcano erupting very soon, like within our lifetime. It started with an article published by a site called Brightside in early February 2023. It was titled, "Yellowstone Supervolcano May Blow Up Very Soon," and this was accompanied by a countdown timer that had been set to March 16, 2023. That date had no special significance, it was just picked at random. But even so, many people panicked and thought that the world was ending. They only realized a few days later when the clock ticked over to April that it was all just a hoax. Now to be fair, Brightside isn't a particularly reputable source. It's basically clickbait. So most scientists were able to see through the idiocy of the whole thing. They knew that there was no way that Yellowstone was going to erupt anytime soon, but not everyone was able to do that. So in today's video we're going to talk about why Yellowstone won't erupt anytime soon and what would happen if it did. The first thing to understand is that Brightside was specifically talking about the magma chamber beneath Yellowstone, not the supervolcano itself. There are 3 different magma chambers underneath the park. The magma chambers are where molten rock or magma is stored before it erupts onto the surface. The largest of these 3 magma chambers is known as the Yellowstone Megazip. This magma chamber extends around 90 kilometers beneath the park. Now it's called a magma chamber, but it's more like a magma warehouse because there isn't actually enough material in here to fill up the entire caldera. In fact, it doesn't even extend under the entire park. Rather, the magma chamber continues southwest from Yellowstone National Park into the Wind River Range of Wyoming. Scientists believe that it may even extend as far south as the Great Rift Valley in eastern Africa. We don't know exactly how much magma is down there because it hasn't been directly observed. We also can't drill a hole to the Megazip to take a look because it's way too deep, approximately 60 kilometers. That's nearly twice the depth of the deepest mine ever dug on Earth. But we do have a pretty good idea of how much magma is down there thanks to seismic tomography. Seismic tomography allows us to take a sort of 3D image of the Earth's interior by sending waves of energy into the planet and measuring how they come back. In 2022, researchers used seismic tomography to estimate the volume of the magmatic system feeding Yellowstone. They found that the magma chamber contains somewhere between 200 and 400 cubic kilometers of molten rock. For reference, the total volume of magma erupted during the Nova Rupta eruption in Alaska in 1912 was around 37 cubic kilometers. So the Megazip contains somewhere between 5 and 20 of that amount of magma. But here's the kicker. Researchers estimate that the magma in the Megazip is replenished at a rate of somewhere between 4 and 8 cubic kilometers per year. At the low end of the range, that means it would take 25,000 years for the magma chamber to fill up. Even at the high end, it would still take 50,000 years. So it's really not going to be filled up anytime soon, especially since it hasn't filled up yet after multiple large eruptions. In fact, the last time Yellowstone erupted was between 13,000 and 14,000 years ago. And while it has produced several smaller eruptions since then, it hasn't done anything major. The reason it hasn't erupted is because of plate tectonics. You see, volcanoes tend to sit atop subduction zones where one tectonic plate is sliding underneath another. As the plates collide, one of them bends and pushes upwards. The upward force eventually becomes greater than the strength of the rocks, and so the rocks break apart and magma erupts out of the resulting vent. If this happens at Yellowstone, it would be the end of the world as we know it. A massive eruption would obliterate all life on the planet. But right now, there isn't enough force pushing up on the North American plate to cause an eruption. The North American plate is currently moving to the southwest at a speed of around 5 centimeters per year. It's moving away from the Pacific plate, which is moving to the northwest at a speed of around 8 centimeters per year. The 2 plates are moving relative to each other at a speed of around 13 centimeters per year. And the rate of convergence is even faster in the region immediately east of the Rocky Mountains, reaching speeds of up to 25 centimeters per year. This means that the North American plate is being pushed away from the Pacific plate at a relatively fast rate, at least compared to the rest of the continent. However, the force isn't great enough to overcome the strength of the rocks at Yellowstone. In other words, we're simply not getting enough push to cause an eruption. But even if we did get a stronger push, it wouldn't matter because the plates are moving in the wrong direction. Plate tectonics works both ways. When the Pacific plate was subducting underneath the North American plate, Yellowstone was able to grow. But now that the North American plate is subducting underneath the Pacific plate, Yellowstone will begin to shrink. In a sense, the movement of the plates is working against Yellowstone. It's literally pulling the park apart. Over millions of years, the the forces will become strong enough to overcome the strength of the rocks at Yellowstone, and at that point, the supervolcano will stop being a volcano. It will essentially cease to exist. And so, whether the plates move faster or slower, Yellowstone isn't going to blow anytime soon. It might be around for tens of millions more years, or it might collapse in a few million years. But either way, it's not going to blow anytime soon. It might help if we remember that Yellowstone is just a volcano. Sure, it's big, and sure, it could technically cause some problems if it erupted, but it's not the end of the world. Yes, it would definitely be bad if Yellowstone erupted, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. Even a super eruption wouldn't necessarily destroy the world as we know it. In fact, humans might be able to survive a super eruption. There are plenty of examples of life surviving nuclear bombs, so I think it's safe to say that life could survive a volcanic eruption. Of course, the eruption would likely wipe out most life in the immediate area, and the ash would probably block out the sun for weeks or even months. But life always seems to find a way. And the same would probably happen after a super eruption. Humans would likely face some hardships, but we would probably pull through. And eventually the world would return to normal. So while it would suck if Yellowstone erupted, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And unfortunately, it also seems highly unlikely that it would happen anytime soon. Like we said, the North American plate is moving away from the Pacific plate at a rate of around 13 centimeters per year. But the force from that movement isn't great enough to cause an eruption. In fact, it would probably take around 1 million years for the plate to start pushing hard enough to cause an eruption. And even then, it would take a few 100,000 more years for the magma chamber to build up enough pressure to blow. But thankfully that's not a problem because the plates are actually moving in the opposite direction. They're moving towards each other. This means that the North American plate is being pulled away from the Pacific plate at a rate of around 13 centimeters per year. This is actually slowing down the rate of subduction, which is already happening at a slow rate, so the chance of Yellowstone erupting anytime soon is extremely low. And the thing is, this has been known for a long time. Scientists have been monitoring Yellowstone for decades, and they've been clear about the fact that it's not going to erupt anytime soon. In fact, they've even developed a threat assessment scale to help people better understand the risk of an eruption. On a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, scientists rate the threat of an eruption at Yellowstone as a 1, so don't worry, you're not going to die from a volcanic eruption anytime soon, unless of course you live near Mount Ibu in Indonesia, which is on pace to erupt sometime next year. Thanks for watching, hope you learned something. If you liked the video, hit that thumbs up button and maybe watch another one.